Greetings. Welcome to Backseat Filmmaker, the show where we let the real filmmakers do all the driving while we sit in the back and bitch about it. I'm Ryan Bijan.
And I'm Joey Monroy.
From another time comes a man of great power.
You talk funny, Nash. Where are you from?
Lots of different places.
Very few original film franchises have been successful enough to spawn 4 theatrical films and a hit series lasting 6 seasons, as well as introducing phrases and concepts which have since entered the pop culture lexicon. The original Highlander was released in 1986 and was directed by Australian filmmaker Russell Mulcahy. It tells the story of Connor MacLeod, a 500-year-old Scotsman living in New York City, fighting to survive in a war with the darkest power. So Joey, what was your first exposure to the Highlander franchise?
It might have been, I can't remember the name of the comedy, but it might have been some comedy that I saw where somebody uttered the famous line, there can be only one. Just as I grew up, I started finding out that it came from Highlander, and I really never, it wasn't one of those things that I actually wanted to seek it out and watch it, basically until you showed your enthusiasm for it and your enthusiasm to show it to me. And so then I accepted that, and we watched the movie, and that was my first actual exposure to the actual film itself.
Growing up in the 90s, I remember there'd be advertisements on TV for like Highlander on VHS. You can order the seasons, this and that. And I would see clips of this guy with the ponytail and the sword and explosions and all kind of crazy stuff going on. So I vaguely remember that. But then when I was about 11 years old, they had shown Highlander Endgame on HBO, and that's the 4th film in the franchise. I hadn't seen the TV show at that point, I hadn't seen the original film, but all the elements were there. It dealt with the themes of immortality. You had the concept of love and loss and sort of dealing with this, and then meanwhile they have this really swashbuckling adventure side where these immortals are competing against each other, so you have the high-octane action, the sword fighting, the martial arts. When you're an 11-year-old kid, it has all the right elements and everything that might get you interested in a film. It's why I love Star Wars, it's why I love Indiana Jones, it's why I love James Bond, and Highlander certainly had all those elements for me. So, as a 24-year-old man, what was it like seeing Highlander for the first time as an adult?
It was, I could immediately see the appeal, and it was really entertaining to me. But since it spawned such a great fan base, then I basically saw the movie in that context. You know what I mean?
Hey, it's a kind of magic.
My first impression was that I really loved Christopher Lambert's performance. In one of the interviews, I think with before Endgame, he expressed that the reason he was so drawn to the character was the romanticism of it. And he is a very romantic and passionate presence. I think we see him and we relate to that, especially the flashback sequences that show him in Scotland 400, 500 years ago, where he has his wife and she starts coping with the reality that she's getting older and he's not. Universal issues that everybody at some point comes to terms with, which is death and getting older. I think the concept is basically what grabbed me the most.
Yeah.
The immortality aspect of it.
Oh, absolutely. And Christopher Lambert is a very interesting actor, like you said. He has a lot of charisma. I can imagine him living 500 years ago. There's a sort of mystery to him. He has the very pronounced brow, the intense stare. So he's just a very unique but powerful on-screen presence, and I think he's really good in the movie.
I absolutely agree. And I think everybody else is really good in the movie. I think Sean Connery is great.
Greetings.
The cast is amazing. If you're going to have a mentor or father figure train you how to become a man, you can't do much better than Sean Connery.
I know, especially, he does play a Spaniard and he's Scottish and he doesn't even lose the Scottish accent, doesn't even attempt to play anything Spanish.
I am Juan Sanchez Villalobos Ramirez, Chief Metallurgist to King Charles V of Spain, and I'm at your service.
There really is nothing about his character that's in any way Spanish. And so...
Well, to be fair, he's Egyptian. He's not really Spanish.
Oh, okay.
So,
all right.
But not that it makes it much better, but I always thought that was so funny. It's you're making a movie called Highlander. Mm-hmm. It's set in the Scottish Highlands, and you get the most famous Scottish actor of all time and cast him as a Spaniard.
The boy is mine.
How can you forget Clancy Brown as the Kurgan?
Yeah. He's a great villain.
I think it's safe to say one of the greatest villains in film history.
Maybe
top 10, maybe. He's up there. I don't know.
That's intense. I think that's intense.
Yeah.
But he's definitely I saw him and I was like, oh, it's that guy. I didn't know what his name was. You clarified who he was and everything. And he's a very recognizable character. He has a very recognizable face, and he's definitely good at portraying a hulking sort of berserker figure. You know what I mean? He's just, most importantly, just really formidable.
He's got the black leather. He's this very silent, intimidating presence. But as the movie goes on, like, the Kurgan has a sense of humor. He's just this kind of, I don't want to say he's jokey or campy, but he doesn't take himself too seriously. Like, he knows he's a badass, and he's just having fun with it.
I can see that.
Like the scene when he's in the church.
Happy Halloween, ladies.
What's funny about Clancy Brown is anytime I watch this movie with someone for the first time, they're like, you know, who is that guy? Who is he? And I'm just like, well, that's Clancy Brown. They're like, oh, what else has he been in? I'm like, well, he's actually the voice of Mr. Krabs in SpongeBob.
I took his head and raped his woman before his blood was even cold.
So that's like,
I didn't know that. I was so surprised when I saw that.
As a big DC Comics fan, he's also known for playing, he was Lex Luthor in Superman the Animated Series and Justice League and all those other cartoons. So Clancy Brown is to Lex Luthor what Mark Hamill is to the Joker.
Okay.
Now, again, watching Highlander for the first time with new eyes, would you agree that it's just kind of like this throwaway, low-budget movie, or do you think there's actually some craft and artistry?
I think there's absolutely some craft and artistry in it. I think the production values were great. I think I even mentioned it while I was watching the movie. I was like, wow, this movie actually looks like, you know, all the money was just put straight into the sets, the costumes, the action. And I think everyone was at the top of their game. I think the director was fantastic. The actors were great.
Yeah. Well, Russell Mulcahy, the director, he had a background in directing music videos. He directed a lot of stuff for Duran Duran and some well-known bands in the early 80s.
I think he's got a really energetic directing style, definitely. Like, his camera's always moving. Like, he's always got a moving, roving camera. Very few, like, just static shots. Music video directors, I feel like, they have such a high, energetic, fast-paced directing style that I think lended itself well to the content, first of all, and I think just made the movie all the more entertaining.
And I think it's something we take for granted as an audience today. It's just like we've grown up with whole generations of music videos, YouTube videos, video games. So any style we saw on the screen, like, we're so desensitized to everything. But you have to remember, like, back in 1986, getting a music video director to do a feature film and to kind of implement that style was kind of a new thing. You have these incredibly clever cuts, these just unbelievable transitions. Like, even if you watch it today, there are scenes like the flashbacks. It's not just like, okay, it dissolves into a flashback. It's like, no, every shot of this film was incredibly well planned ahead of time. It's not like you just went over there with a shaky cam and was like, okay, we'll just shoot some stuff and cut it in post. It's like, no, the scene where he's in the parking garage and the camera tilts up and then it transitions into medieval Scotland.
Or the scene where you have the close-up of his face and it sort of dissolves into the Mona Lisa art on the side of a building, and then you see a shot of him walking towards the camera. You can absolutely tell that all of it was planned so well beforehand. I mean, you can see the love that went into it, because you know that they sat down, storyboarded the shots, storyboarded, you know, they had the transitions carefully planned out.
Yeah.
Because you don't go into the editing room and you're like, oh, I mean, I guess these two will fit together well, you know?
Yeah.
The story beats followed each other, like, on screen. Like, you could see that each shot that followed the next had a purpose.
Yeah.
And everything was planned, I think, visually really well.
All things considered, it just moves along at a pretty quick pace. And I chalk that up to, in the hands of a lesser director, it would have been so easy to tell this movie in chronological order. Like, you could have started it in medieval Scotland and just kind of told it in the order it was made, but I don't think it would have been as interesting.
You definitely have to take advantage of the fact that this guy is going to live forever. You know, definitely set it in two different time periods. And again, I mentioned the flashbacks before. They use that as an ability to also give Connor some character. You know, they show his backstory. They show when he died. They show that he was basically banished by his, you know, best friends. He was beaten, like, spit on, like, almost burned.
And of course you have to have, like, in any film like this, they always have to, like, somehow incorporate the Christ imagery. Religious imagery.
When he's leaving, when he's, like, walking up the hill and he's like...
He's got the pillar on his back.
Exactly.
What do you call it? The stock? He's in the stock.
Yeah. But I think it just gives him a little bit of a tragic and romantic sort of backstory.
Yeah.
And they implemented that really well. And again, you can only really do that with that immortality concept at the heart of the movie.
Yeah.
And then you see him in the future, and you can see on his face that he's still, like, you know, coping with a lot of the things that have haunted him already. You know, lost loves, or I guess just the violence, the day-to-day violence that he lives in.
And I think Christopher Lambert conveys a lot of that with just his glare, with his look. I think any other actor, if you would have gotten, like, you know, say Tom Cruise in the role or someone like that, it wouldn't have had the same effect.
He's got this, like, whispered, kind of grizzled and, like, almost spent action hero-y voice.
1783 was a very good year. Mozart wrote his great mass. The Montgolfier brothers went up in their first balloon. And England recognized the independence of the United States.
Is that right?
Because you can hear him, and you know that this guy's been through some shit, you know? Like, exactly. And so, yeah, definitely. I mean, I think he's great in the role.
But no, what's interesting about that is I loved how, as Connor's watching the wrestling match, you see this brutality, like people are so entertained and having a good time. He's juxtaposing that imagery with flashbacks of medieval Scotland. But at that point in the movie, if you've never seen the film, you don't quite know what's going on. It's only until later on that it's like clarified. That's his backstory, and these are his memories.
That beginning shot was just, I mean, it was breathtaking, because you're flying through the stadium, you can see how many people are in it, you can see the wrestlers, and then it just ends on his face where he's just almost disappointed with what he's seeing, really ashamed at what he's seeing, you know what I mean? Just because he's been through so much violence in his life, and I mean, to see other people celebrate it, it's almost like irritating to him.
You alluded to this earlier, but just with that concept, there's so many powerful themes you can explore.
All the movies are just a beautiful testament to how great that concept is. The movie, 6 seasons of a television show, you can't do that with just any story. You can't do that with just any idea. The fact that this has generated so much content, and haven't you mentioned that they're thinking about making a remake, or there have been rumblings about a remake?
Yeah, apparently, like it's sort of been in development hell for a while.
And honestly, with, like, you know, technology now, you know, with how filmmaking has progressed, I'd love to see still a very grounded, like, not Highlander 2, like, flashy, no, absolutely preposterously over budget version of a story that really should be told almost like a romantic action drama, which is absolutely what it is, and it has to be grounded. It has to be grounded in character and in the bond that these immortals have, either with each other or the people that they love in their own present, in their own time. It's all just because of that initial script, which was an original. It's just an original piece, right? By
well, Gregory Widen, the original screenwriter, apparently he had written this as part of the film class. It was just a draft of the script he did, and he was confident with it. And he brought it to the producers, Peter Davis and William Panzer. They bought the rights, and they had sort of like fleshed out the concept and worked on it for a while. Obviously, in the 30 years since Highlander 1, there have been lots of like takes and references and other kind of genres that have taken that concept. I mean, it's why vampire movies are so popular today. The burden of immortality, the pain of immortality, seeing the people you love grow old and die.
I mean, I know I was watching the movie and I asked you, is this based on a book? Is this actually based on some work of fiction before the movie was made? And you told me it was an original piece, and that's amazing. Like, for a screenplay, it's dense with backstory and content. I mean, you know that they went through the lives of these characters, or through the idea of immortality. You know, I mean, they even came up with their own names for how they're, you know, gathering the power of their fallen foes. You know, which is the quickening.
Let's talk about
and even in the movie, when they first say the quickening, but I remember they said the quickening. I was like, kind of, what is that? You know, like I asked myself, what is that? But I just went along with the movie. I feel like the screenplay trusts that the audience will eventually have an idea of what's going on.
Yeah.
Whereas it could have gone the easy route, which is, you know, the quickening. It's a magical process that happens after you kill your foe.
There's not a lot of exposition.
There absolutely isn't a lot of exposition. And so I think it's a really smart decision and a really brave decision to really trust the audience.
Too many fantasy and science fiction films nowadays, they want to like stop every 5 minutes and explain what's going on and break it down, and I don't think, you know, the audience, they're smart, if they're invested, they're smart enough to pick up on these things. But let's talk about the terminology. So in Highlander, there's the game. You know, that's the concept where all these immortals, for some unknown reason, have to fight each other to the death. The only way you can kill an immortal is by taking his head. When an immortal's head is taken, like you said, the quickening, they gain the power of the fallen immortal, they get their knowledge, and they grow stronger. It's the time of the gathering. That's when the few immortals who remain gather to a certain faraway land and place.
Or New York City.
Or New York City. And fight till the end, because in the end, there can be only one.
Yeah.
So it's so bizarre, because this is a movie, like, I try to explain the basic plot to people, and when I watch the movie, I don't think about it because it works so well. The movie flows well, you're invested, you're involved, it's really engaging. But when you're trying to explain the basic plot, it is bizarre. I mean, just because it is so unique and there really wasn't anything like that beforehand.
I mean, there's so many elements to it. Like I said, I mean, just trying to categorize it into a genre, I said action, romantic,
historical epic, I mean...
drama, I think that's what I said. Like, I mean, like, you can't really put it in one genre, and so at the same time, you can't give it just a small 10, 15 word log line that explains exactly what it is without obviously confusing people or, you know, just baffling them and, you know, risking that they won't watch the movie, you know? You really do need to trust that the movie won't hold your hand, but that you will be entertained by it, and that you will, you know, you will have to, I guess, maybe even think of it while you're watching, you know what I mean? Maybe just be in awe at this concept that was just, you know, written by a college student, but it's still so dense and still so entertaining that it is worth you know, making fan fiction, making sequels, prequels, television shows out of. You know, no matter how bad they turn out to be, it's just.
We'll get to that in a moment.
Exactly.
Nick Offerman from Parks and Recreation has, I want to say it was in Entertainment Weekly, says that Highlander is the single greatest film about becoming a man ever made. And I think that there are those metaphors for like puberty, growing up.
I think you can read into it and say it is about becoming a man, but because he does, first of all, he learns that he's an immortal. He gets banished. He basically gets emasculated. He loses his own place in the MacLeod, you know, in the MacLeod clan. And so I think that's the first time where I think he does doubt himself, and everybody who grows up, everybody who goes through the stages of maturing, everybody doubts themselves constantly. And so I think Sean Connery definitely plays that father figure that helps him grow up, that helps him find that confidence, that helps him learn how to live to be an immortal. And that definitely can be read as a metaphor for learning how to be an adult, learning how to, you know, live responsibly, learning how to, you know, just learning how to be an all-around just good person, you know? And so I think it absolutely is one of the ideas that you can derive from, you know, Highlander.
But, you know, taking that into consideration, I don't think it underwrites the female characters, because there's different types of femininity represented in the film. You have his wife Heather in Scotland who loves her. They have a very loving, kind relationship. She's very supportive. You have Rachel, the girl that he rescues in World War II, and it's implied he raises her as a daughter. She grows up, and then when we next see her in the film, she's sort of a mother figure to him. And then you have Brenda Wyatt, the forensic police detective who's sort of like following Connor MacLeod, and it starts off as an obsession, but then they start to fall for each other. So what do you think of these different characters?
Heather really had a profound effect. You know, her death, the fact that he lived on after her. First of all, that helped him, again, grow up, that helped him gain strength, that helped him learn how to live, how to move on, how to move forward. I think the Rachel character serves, talking about his character development, to stress that he's someone concerned with saving people, someone concerned with keeping people out of harm's way, finding love in unlikely places. And he raises her as a father, and then she becomes a mother figure. And I think there's absolutely a sort of like irony to that that's really unique, and again can only be done with what's at the heart of the story, the immortality aspect. And so I think it serves its purpose for the plot, for the character, and for us to relate to him. As a hero. And then I think Brenda is probably I want to say the weakest of the characters, just because she does serve that sort of, especially watching the sequels where before he, you know, has sex with these girls, he basically like confesses to him that he isn't, he gives his name, where he came from.
That's the single greatest pickup line in movie history.
Exactly. I mean
I am Connor MacLeod of the Clan MacLeod. I was born in 1518 in the village of Glenfinnan on the shores of Loch Shiel. And I am immortal.
Who doesn't want to have that ability to just be like, hey man, I'm immortal. like how badass is that?
It becomes like a running joke in the series.
Exactly. It almost becomes a running joke. but she does very much serve as that love interest, that girl that of course he's gonna have sex with her and fall in love with her, and she's gonna follow him around, and she's gonna be in peril at the end.
Yeah.
She does very much serve a very streamlined, almost like generic approach to a female character in a movie.
What I do know is that because you were born different, men will fear you, try to drive you away, like the people of your village.
I'm not a big fan of certain film criticism where people try to look in and find things that aren't necessarily there. Well, they'll be like, oh, well, this is a metaphor for that, or oh, sexually, there's a repression in this. Like, I'm not that guy. But you watch Highlander, some of the lines and dialogue, when Ramirez tells Connor, you must leave your wife, you can't be with her, you can't have children, you're born different. If someone wanted to, you could kind of read in some sort of a homoerotic subtext. Would you agree with that, or do you think if you're looking for it, it's there?
I think it definitely comes into play in Endgame more than it does in the first Highlander movie.
Yeah.
I know we might talk about that later, but I think that relationship is definitely portrayed more as a mentor-mentee relationship. There is that scene where they're like running after each other on the beach. Which is
it's an 80s action film, so you have to have the homoerotic scene.
Exactly, that is. I mean, and you could say, yeah, sure, interpret it as a homoerotic scene, or just say they're just having a good time. I mean, joshing around, they're both guys,
just horseplay.
Exactly, it's just all horseplay, and you could definitely read into it like that. But I think there's other subtext at play, like that growing up subtext that we mentioned earlier.
I mean, on the surface, really, like to me, the relationship between Ramirez and Connor is more of a father figure, a mentor figure, and that's not always how I interpret it. Mm-hmm. See that, and it's interesting because Russell Mulcahy, the director, is gay, so I wonder if that ever crossed his mind when he was making the film. And it
might have crossed his mind, but it just the fact that it's content that you can pull so many ideas or so many. Or at least just believe that there's some subtext in it. I mean, that just gives it that extra power. I mean, you can watch Highlander over and over again, and you'll see different scenes differently, or I don't know. I mean, you can read it any way you want, but that's just like testament to its its enduring likability.
So as good and as perfect of a self-contained movie as Highlander 1 is, we all know Hollywood can't leave a good thing alone. We retreat it to Highlander 2, The Quickening.
And all its awfulness.